Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are in this big world that we're living in. My name is Finn Mpofu, and I'm Director of Partner Success and Community here at Startup Grind. I am based outside in right now a not so sunny Berkshire, England, that is getting a little bit dark. And it's a great honor and privilege for me to welcome you all to our inaugural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Month presented with Comcast NBCUniversal. This signature event forms a part of a month-long celebration of diversity, equity, and inclusion presented with Silicon Valley Bank, where our chapters all around the world are really highlighting and celebrating the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm just going to take a few minutes just to share a few thoughts with you all. I'll share my screen, and if the team just in the chat can confirm that my screen is showing okay in the chat backstage. Perfect, excellent. Now, diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that is incredibly important to every single one of us as individuals, and more so as founders or executives, leaders, employees in a startup environment, really being cognizant of the importance of DEI. So I was reminded of this meme cartoon that you see up on your screen shortly around equality and equity. The original source of this particular cartoon was from the Interaction Institute for Social Change, and the artist being Angus Maguire. So credit to him for putting this together. But my colleague Bruce actually in the chat is going to share an original backstory behind where this cartoon meme came from. Now, a little story about this meme. Many of you have probably seen it across social media, maybe in Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter. But I was actually reminded about it about 3 weeks ago when my son and his football team were being given a workshop. He plays football, so they were being given a workshop around Show Racism the Red Card here in the UK. And one of his team players essentially mentioned this meme around how to kind of define equality and equity and the differences between them. And it was so profound that a 12-year-old was able to kind of recollect this meme. And to me, it represents a lot, just the beginning, but a lot when it comes to diversity, equity, in particular in this case, and of course, inclusion. You see the different variations on this particular meme. What you see there is 3 individuals. They have their backs to us, so you can't necessarily tell their gender per se. And in the equality side, which to my when I see the screen as my left-hand side, they're all standing on the crate, overlooking a fence, which is the same height, and watching a baseball game. If they were in England or Australia, as one of the variations showed, it was cricket that they'd essentially changed it to. But in this particular case, they're watching a baseball game. Now, what is clear for everyone to see, whilst equally, they're all standing on a crate that is exactly the same height, and the fence being the same height, as individuals, they are not necessarily the same height. Very obvious to see. When they then talk about equity, it's about the individual who is the tallest in that particular meme, recognizing that the shortest individual, so let me reiterate that again, the tallest individual, recognizing, because that's the narrative that we're essentially given or can deduce from it, is given the opportunity and recognizes that the other individual who is the shortest on the screen does not have the same opportunity that I have. And I don't necessarily actually need this crate. I can see over the fence just fine. So let me give them a helping hand and provide them my crate so they can basically add that to their crate, and now they can see over the fence. And it's one of the most profound memes. And when this young football player kind of pointed this out, I was like, wow, at such a young age, being able to kind of instantly recognize and see the difference between equality and equity and the importance of it. What more for us as the parents that were in the room, or, you know, the parents or the adults that are essentially on this particular, participating in this particular DEI summit, that if young children are being essentially educated at a very, very young age, it is important for us as adults to continuously educate ourselves on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we certainly hope that this month-long celebration, I do hope that you've had the opportunity to join some of our global events taking place all around the world and hear from some of the many speakers that are participating in it. But we certainly hope that you enjoy this particular summit, where we'll be able to share with you some phenomenal insights from some really esteemed, great speakers. And we have two particular sessions that we'll be sharing with you. The first, which will be immediately after this, we'll be talking about something that is important for a lot of startups, but more so those that are underrepresented. And that title of that session is called Getting the Money, Overcoming Bias While Fundraising as an Underrepresented Founder. And the stats say it all. We all know that underrepresented founders raise significantly less funding than those that are well represented, should I say. But we obviously are also very cognizant that many organizations out there, including Comcast and Silicon Valley Bank, are actually taking proactive measures to really kind of flip and script that and change that narrative. And we'll be excited to see that. Our next session shortly after that will be from Silicon Valley Bank, and they'll be talking about the $1 trillion opportunity investing in diverse and women founders. We really hope that you enjoy these sessions. At Startup Grind, we view ourselves as the world's largest startup community, educating, inspiring, and connecting entrepreneurs the world over so that we can help them build, scale, and grow their organizations. And diversity, equity, and inclusion for us as a global organization is very, very, very important to us. Just the other day, I was talking to founders that were based in Israel, or one of our chapter directors that was based in Israel, and some of our other chapter directors that were based in the Middle East, and other chapter directors that were based in Africa, chapter directors that were based in Latin America. In this picture that you see in front of you, we have chapter directors from every single continent that is represented. And I am incredibly proud to be part of such a diverse and inclusive and equitable community. And I hope that you can contribute to it in any which way that you can. None of this would be possible without a massive thanks to our partners. As I mentioned, this Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit is presented with Comcast NBCUniversal Lift Labs, and the entire month-long celebration of diversity, equity, and inclusion is presented with Silicon Valley Bank. If you're interested in connecting with me, it's very simple. Finn Mpofu, slightly tricky surname. Someone mentioned they thought I was from Tonga, but I'm originally from Zimbabwe. So if there are any Zimbabweans in our virtual Bevy virtual conference, shout out to you. Please feel free to connect with me, and if I can help and support you in any which way, I will be delighted to do so. Thank you so much for joining us in this very important month. We hope that you enjoy our next sessions. Over to you, Bruce.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isaiah Jenkins. I am the Senior Manager of Programming and Employee Engagement at Comcast NBCUniversal. I'm excited to be here today at the Startup Grinds Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Summit to tell you a little bit about Lift Labs and introduce our extraordinary panel. Lift Labs was created with input from more than 1,500 entrepreneurs from around the world. Our programming helps startups understand our business, test and pilot things with us, and become better storytellers. We offer mentorship and support from our elite network of entrepreneurs and business leaders to help founders at every stage of their business and take them to the next level. Today, our incredible panel of founders will have an in-depth conversation about the real-life experiences, including challenges seeking capital to grow their startups. They'll talk about navigating unconscious biases, funders struggling to understand their vision, and even the difficult decision to walk away from funds that don't. They'll also give an honest and direct advice on identifying suitable sources of capital and partnerships for your business. After a quick video, please help me in joining the panel as we welcome Kishore Rogers, founder and CEO of Time Study, Michael Mapunga, founder and CEO of Afroland TV, and Sylvester Mobley, founder and CEO of Coded by Kids. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate it.
Startups are building the future with Comcast NBCUniversal. Our startup engagement team searches the world for promising founders who build connectivity, media, entertainment, and sports technologies that will break barriers and reshape industries. We offer expert-led workshops, live events, and mentorship programs for startups at every stage. This includes our world-class accelerators based in Philadelphia and Atlanta, and year-round business development opportunities for enterprise-ready companies. Lift Labs is where founders get access to experts, partners, and platforms that shape and amplify their innovations. Sports Tech delivers partnerships to help develop the next generation of founders changing the world of competitive sports. No matter where you are in your journey, connect with Comcast NBCUniversal to elevate the future of your startup.
Hey, um, I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's discussion. We're excited to bring a both important but also very nuanced conversation to the forefront. And we want to be able to give everyone as takeaways just some tangible tactics to help them navigate the often challenging and difficult under the most ideal circumstances undertaking of raising capital. I'm Sylvester Mobley, and I am extremely excited to have the opportunity to serve as your moderator for this conversation. Just a little bit about me. I am the founder and CEO of Coded by Kids. We are a tech and innovation education organization. So we focus on preparing underrepresented young people for leadership positions in tech with a lens to preparing them to start venture capital-backed startups. I have been in tech since 2001, so I have 20 years of tech experience in a variety of roles. And I am also now the co-managing partner of Plainsight Capital. Plainsight Capital is an early stage venture capital fund investing in tech and tech-driven startups led by underrepresented founders. Before we get started, I want to make sure that I thank our partners, Comcast NBCUniversal and Comcast Lift Labs, for helping bring us here today, bring all this together. As Isaiah mentioned, Lift Labs supports founders at all stages and often partners with organizations across the global startup ecosystem like Startup Grind. The Lift Labs team engages with founders from around the world and is a valuable partner in many startup communities, especially in Philadelphia, which is my hometown, and where my companies are based. Before we get started, I want to take a few minutes to introduce our panelists who have a very impressive list of accomplishments. First, we have Kishal Rogers, CEO of Time Study. She's a technology entrepreneur using computer science, systems thinking, and common sense to create intelligent, human-centered solutions. As the founder and CEO of Time Study, Kishal is one of the first Black women in the state of Virginia to raise millions in venture capital to scale her tech startup. Next, we also have Michael Mapanga, CEO of Afroland TV. The actor turned entrepreneur is the co-founder of Afroland TV, a streaming service with hundreds of hours of free programming created by film and TV creators in Africa and its diaspora, including Nollywood, the Hollywood of Nigeria. Afroland TV, an alum of the Comcast NBCUniversal Techstars Lift Labs Accelerator, powered by Techstars, recently announced a partnership with Zumo that brings its feature films to the platform's 24 million monthly active users. Afroland TV will have its own section on Zumo under the Black Cinema category, and content is available to stream anytime. It's just the latest content sharing partnership for Afroland TV, which is also available on X1, Xfinity, Flex, Local Now, Plex, Vizio, Watch Free Plus, Rakuten TV, and Huawei Video. All right, so we're getting ready to kick off this discussion, and I'm going to start with just a few data points to provide some context and set the stage for the conversation. As many people have heard, we have experts representing several sectors here, but we've all had to face parallel obstacles when it comes to being a part of a group that's historically excluded from significant capital. When it comes to securing venture capital, Black and Latinx business owners still remain far behind their white counterparts. A recent Crunchbase study reports that Black and Latinx founders receive less than 3% of venture capital funding in 2020. And since 2015 have represented just 2.4% of the total venture capital funding raised. So let's dive in. Funding for underrepresented founders in the US hit nearly $1.8 billion in the first half of 2021, a fourfold increase from the previous year. But most venture-backed startups are still overwhelmingly white, male, Ivy League educated, and based in Silicon Valley. And this is according to a study conducted by Rate My Investor and Diversity VC. However, some trends still suggest that a great majority of traditional venture investors are investing in late stage founders instead of early or even pre-seed stages. So this begs the question for minority founders who don't have family, friends, or connections to lean on for the first $250,000. So as a investor, I'm going to speak to, even as a venture capital investor, I see most investors who go later stage, in large part because of the risk. As an investor, all of your risk is in the early stage. The later you go, the less risk there is, but that does leave a significant gap in the space if you are an underrepresented founder, if you are a Black and brown founder, who you're not coming from a background where you have access to networks of friends and family or angels that can provide you with that initial capital. So there has to be solutions. There has to be people that are willing to fill that gap and enter that space to ensure that highly talented founders that have a ton of potential are able to move forward and find success, and their companies aren't dying on the vine simply because they lack access to networks. So I'm going to use that as the framing for the conversation today. And I'm going to start with a question that's open to anyone who wants to jump in. Just talking about and thinking about your journey and raising capital and getting to the point that you're at now, are there things the more experienced you would tell the you at the start of your journey to avoid during those early days raising capital? I know there's things I would tell myself to avoid or do differently, and I would love to hear from both of you what those things are for you.
Yeah, I have a list. I won't name them all because I don't think we have time. I have a list of things that I would avoid. Honestly, I think to your point about founders that have tons of potential, I actually think that's one of the areas where there's an opportunity to shift how underrepresented founders are supported. How do we define tons of potential? So one of the things that I encountered was this uphill battle against the pattern of a successful founder. So there's certain patterns, there are logos, there's where you live. There's so many things that are against a lot of underrepresented founders. And I started my journey with Time Study. It's my third company, but I live in Virginia. I'm a woman of a certain age, but I've been in tech for 25 years. And it honestly required a lot of effort just building the network just so that I could represent the pattern. So one of the things that I would do differently, given a little bit more experience, is to not spend as much time doing that. I don't think it serves us very well. I think I would have spent more time actually finding investors that could see what we were doing more quickly without so much of the training on how to represent the pattern. I honestly think that's a tax that's placed on a lot of us. We get so much mentorship and training on how to represent these patterns, but patterns are very dynamic and they're also set by a very small number of people. So we all have this small list of founders that made the exit, that have the big companies, and they represent a certain characteristic of founders. So that's changing every day. And what we're doing is chasing an outdated pattern. So I would have honestly spent more time looking for investors that were along for the ride in what we were building. And I wouldn't spend as much time at all in some of the programs that we spent time in. Also, fundraising is a team effort. So I probably would have formed a team much quicker than I did.
Excellent. No, I completely agree with you on that. And the most important thing here for myself, and I believe for the entire Black community as well, is we need to build an ecosystem to educate founders, right? That was one of the biggest hurdles that I had to get over, right? I didn't have the opportunity to grow up with a rich uncle, right? Anybody in the startup ecosystem. So I literally had to re-educate myself after college, right? And I learned more during that time than I did in college. So it's all about the ecosystem, right? Educating ourselves, because we approach investors without any knowledge and we get so many no's than our counterparts do. And it's not because, and sometimes it's not because that these investors don't see us as, as worthy founders, but we are just simply not educated. And that's why it's very, very important that we build our ecosystem. A couple of things that I would change, and what you said resonates with everything that I also went through as well, is I wasted a lot of time with investors that didn't know this industry at all. I was having to educate these investors in meetings. And this was a complete waste of time, because investors, they will never tell you a direct no. They would take your meeting sometimes if they think something is interesting, right? And then they'll wait 2-3 weeks from now just to give you, yeah, not right now, right? But as founders, we appreciate quick no's. And I didn't know that in the very early stages, right? I was just approaching anybody who had or who said had money, right? Everybody says they have money. Right, and I wasted so much time, and it took my company so much more effort to get where we are than it would take, our counterparts. Right, it took us literally 5 years just to get to the beginning. right? It'll take our counterparts, right, literally just a couple of months. And it's because of the education, the knowledge that I didn't know. This is stuff that I actually had to learn while going through it. So I don't regret those hurdles because I learned from it, right? And I'm now able to educate the community myself as well, right? So start by getting active in the local startup ecosystem. Get active, be at all these pitch competitions, meet, network with people, and you start growing from that standpoint. And also, I came into this thing as well as a solo founder. Boy, that is the hardest thing, right? That is the hardest thing, being a solo founder. Again, I didn't know I had to come. I had to find a or technically, it's not mandatory to find a co-founder, but I guarantee you it'll save you a lot of heartache as you continue to scale and grow as a company. So those are some of the things that I would definitely do or tell my past self in improving. And I hope that answers the question.
It does. So I want to echo two things. Kishal, you brought up building a team. Michael, you talked about you can't do it as a solo founder. It's always surprising to me how many founders I meet with, and you start asking me about the team, and there is no team. There's also, and this is anecdotal, I don't know if there's a data point behind this, but just in the founders I meet with, there's a much higher proportion of Black founders that aren't technical, but also lack a technical co-founder. And just from an investment perspective, that's a huge risk for the company. Like, building a company by yourself is a risk, but then to go out there and not being technical and thinking like, I'm going to be able to build this tech company, I think more of us need to focus earlier on how do I find that team? How do I find those co-founders? The education piece is huge as well. This is a conversation I have a lot, where I say a lot of times an investor isn't saying no because of outright racial discrimination. An investor is saying no because we don't either understand the space, we don't understand the language, the terms. And that's because we missed out on a lot of that education early on. So we have to fill those gaps as well. One of the things that I'm wondering is, are there tangible steps that funders can take to make investment and make funding more equitable? These things are always two-way streets. It's interesting when we talk about educating, and Black and brown founders and underrepresented founders need to be more educated. That's only one part of the equation. The other side is what needs to happen on the funder side. Are there things that either of you can think of that funders can do to make funding more equitable?
Yeah, I think transparency is one thing that comes to mind immediately on the process. So, I've encountered funders that don't have a process or don't seem to have a process. And it's difficult to know the scope of your engagement with them. Also, what's their decision-making process? So, funders, we get questioned a lot on our roadmap and how we make decisions. I think funders should follow their own advice and actually have a process and a system for making decisions. That enables founders to actually be educated on whether or not this is an appropriate investor. Secondly, I think honestly, regarding their partners, one of the things that I look for, I do quite a bit of research on investors. I use Crunchbase a lot, and also Press Hits. I look for investors that already have diversity in their own portfolios. I look for investors that have invested in companies like mine. And the reason why I do that is I don't have the luxury of time to train them on what we're doing. Also, I don't want to be the guinea pig for diversity for investors. So I actually look for investors that are already in the business of funding people like me. It saves me so much time because when they meet me, we can focus on the work and our traction. So I would say, also look at your own partners and your about pages. A lot of well-educated founders are paying attention to that as well. And then I wanted to make a quick point about the founding team. I'm also a solo founder. I do agree with that. I think if you don't have co-founders, founders at least have a co-founding team. But I do understand also why many founders don't have a team. I'm a solo founder, but I'm also a computer scientist. I'm very technical, and I've spent years building software, so that kind of worked. So some of the discovery phase that underrepresented founders experience is that there is no discovery phase. They just jump into the fundraising. You already have to have it figured out. So you're robbed of this discovery period where you actually learn, you meet technical people and form teams. But we could talk about that later. But I think there's an environment that investors can understand a little more clearly to help them know why a solo founder would show up without a team.
Correct. I agree. I agree with that as well. And for me, again, just bouncing off you, Kishar, is transparency, right? Listen, it doesn't take 3 weeks to get a no, right? It doesn't take 4 weeks to get a no. Everything is about time. And they always, funders or, VCs, angel investors, they always come to the meetings with, how we can improve our process, right? Our pitching, building a team, right? Go-to-market strategy and so forth. But coming from their perspective as well, it also helps founders such as myself in the very early stages to understand where we stand with this, with these investment opportunities with them, right? Telling us, okay, listen, this might not be the time for us to come in at this round very early on, keeps me moving, right? It keeps me looking for other opportunities. And one of the strategies that I've also learned that I actually do take advantage of, right, is in those first meetings that I have with these investors, you have to be very, very open and frank with them, right? Listen, you've heard my pitch. You like what we're doing. You love the product. You love the team. You love the service. Are you interested in moving forward? You have to be able to ask the right questions as a founder, right? Are you interested in this opportunity? Is this something you guys want to pursue? How long is your due diligence process, right? What is the average check size, right? Is this going to take you a week, 2 days? How long is this going to take? These are questions that will get investors to that yes, right? There's a book called Getting to Yes, right? I believe that's the name. I forgot. It was quite some time ago, but I recommend that book to our early stage founders as well, right? You have to know how to communicate in these meetings, right? Because these investors would take their sweet time, right? They're not in a rush to invest in you unless it's, you have a previous record of, maybe you're a serial founder, but they're not in a rush to invest in you. You have to be able to prove to them why they should invest in you or why they should invest in your company. And the truth of the matter is, these investors, they don't have a large portfolio or pipeline of good startups coming through. So if you do a great job as a founder in communicating why this is a hot opportunity, why these investors should come, you ask the right questions in the first early meetings, that leaves an impression on them, right? You might come in inexperienced with not a big team, but obviously you have a vision. But if you're able to communicate that vision clearly, you ask the right questions, it speeds things up.
I appreciate that. It's been strange for me having been a founder and now being an investor and seeing it from the inside. Kishal, to your point, often there isn't a process at a lot of venture capital. I mean, like, that's just the reality. It's all over the map. There's funds that I know of and work with, and they have like really well-defined processes. And there's some, and it's like a couple of guys just making random decisions. So it is all over the map. And sometimes it can seem opaque because you're like, I have no idea where things are. A lot of the questions, Michael, you brought up are really, really good questions to ask. And I think, I found this in a lot of meetings I have with founders. Founders aren't asking those questions enough. And it's to their detriment. The more you can ask them those questions, the more insight you're getting into the process, the more you understand. I think also something that gets left out, and Kashad, like you've definitely touched on this, being targeted with who you're going after. I usually recommend people, like, if you're raising capital, you should treat it the same way you do with going after customers. Like, you should have what's your ideal persona? Who's your ideal investor, so that you're not wasting time that you don't have. Michael, I want to keep going with a thread that you kind of started, and I'm going to jump to storytelling. Should the focus be on crafting the right pitch of your vision or of yourself? And Kashad, I'm going to start with you, and then we can go to Michael.
You're going to start with me, okay?
I'm going to start with you, Kashad. Michael started the thread. Now I'm going to jump to you.
All right. I think it's both. I don't think you can choose. I think you do have to sort of tell the origin story, like before you just jump into, like, this is what I'm doing. And that includes you. And it's also, is you, who are you, and why are you the best person to be working on this? So in that regard, I think you do have to tell a story. And then, what problem are you solving? That's a story. How did you discover this problem? And what do you perceive as the roadmap? Another story. But I actually think it's both. And I think that I always lead with me, because I think that's natural to me. When you meet people, you introduce yourself. And, I've seen in certain programs, sometimes people will coach you to lead with the idea and then end with the team, or start with the team and end with the idea. And what I've noticed is a pattern of, if the team is impressive enough, you lead with the team. And if not, you put it at the end. And I would actually recommend everyone to lead with themselves. Make an introduction, talk about who you are briefly, why they should be talking to you, and why you're the best person to be working on that idea. And it is an art to be able to do that in a very concise amount of time, in a way that allows investors to remember you, because they do speak with hundreds, like a lot, some of them even more. They speak to a lot of founders. And so everyone has to have an awareness of what the other person on the other side of the table is going through. So they've met like 60 people that day. How do they remember you? That's important.
Absolutely. And yes, both is very important. But in the very early stages, it's you leading it, because your idea is worth nothing. Right, in the very early stages, it's worth nothing, right? You can have valuation of 5 million. Yeah, those are just numbers. Those are just, you're throwing those out. But you need to be able to convince them this is going to grow into a big idea. Tell them why you are the best person to execute on this idea. So I'm alumni of the Comcast NBCUniversal Lift Labs Accelerator, powered by Techstars. And one of the things that we learned in there are 3 things as a founder that you should be focusing on. Especially in the very early stages. Number 1 is vision, right? You should be able to communicate that vision, craft that story to be able to articulate when you speak with investors or anybody that's interested in hearing about your company, and make it believable, right? You have to be passionate about the idea that you're creating. Number 2 is you have to be able to manage and grow the team, right? Because that vision will lead to you getting followers, right? To you getting the co-founder because he believes in that vision, because you've sold it well. So number 2 is building the team. And then number 3 is managing capital, right? This goes to raising the capital, and also obviously managing the finances within the company. So obviously your runway when you're going to run out of money. So those are the 3 things. So in the early stages, focus on how can I tell this idea on why this is going to be so great and why I'm the right person to do it. Focus on that. And then at the later stages of your growth, right? We're talking series B, C, and onward, right? Then it becomes more about the numbers, right? What has your company done in the early stages to back those numbers up?
Yeah, no, I really like both of those. Michael, so the point that you're raising is actually a really good point. And, my co-managing partner and I have had this conversation a lot. At the early stage, the investment is really in the people. It's not in the idea. It's not in the product. At the early stage, for all I know, whatever product you think you have could not exist or go away. The question I'm asking is, are these the right people to invest in? And when people are leading with the company or the product or the idea, that's not the thing that I'm betting on. That's not the thing that I'm investing in. I think more people need to really be cognizant of that. It's about them. It's about the team. And then just the art of storytelling. Because storytelling is there's an art to it. And how do you tell a story? And then how do you tell a story that's connected to numbers? Being able to tell that story of like, this is going to be the greatest thing ever, as I think you were saying, Michael, like, this is going to, like, you have to invest in this. This is, if you don't invest in this, you are missing out on the next biggest opportunity. And this is how I can do it. And this is what the numbers say. And this is what the growth says. Because sometimes, I'll meet with someone who's a really good storyteller, but the story is disconnected from the numbers. And how do you tie the two together and say, like, this is the greatest thing ever? I like that, Michael. I like that.
All right. I'm still trying to work on connecting the two together.
That makes two of us, Michael.
Takes practice, I guess.
It does. Yeah. So, Michael, word is you're famous now. You did a docuseries.
Correct.
So outside of asking you for an autograph, do you want to? Can you talk a little bit about the docuseries and how that has impacted your company?
Yeah, for sure. I was honored and blessed to be a part of an exclusive documentary by Comcast NBCUniversal, which was produced, executive produced by Lift Labs, and it's called Founding in Color, and it follows the journey of entrepreneurs of color, the genesis of their ideas, the struggle of raising capital, and just who these founders are. And again, I was just I was very blessed to share the screen with all these incredible founders. And it premiered on X1 and also is now available on Peacock as of, I believe, Friday. I lost track of my dates. But this was an incredible opportunity because it goes again to the number one thing as a founder that you're supposed to do is create that vision and be able to communicate that vision. And this opportunity gave me a platform to be able to share the vision of Afroland TV and a little bit about myself on why it's important for Africans and Black people to control the narrative, but most importantly, also controlling the distribution channels, right? You can control the narrative all you want to, but if you're having to go out there and to beg people to play your movie, to play your show, right? That's another thing. But now controlling those channels, and it's very, very few Black executives that control TV networks. And we're just, again, blessed to be in this opportunity to be sharing our vision, to be changing the narrative of a continent. A lot of people do not understand this, but the African film industry is the second biggest film industry in the world when it comes to content getting produced on the continent. But less than 1% of those stories make it outside of Africa, right? You can go anywhere else in the world. You can find Hollywood movies, you can find Asian movies, you can find Bollywood, which is India, and obviously European movies. But where's the African stories? We have so many rich stories from the continent that don't travel outside of the continent, right? And we're starting to see traction from Black Panther. You have Lion King, Afrobeat music is another thing standing up. So we are taking the bull by the horns and bringing African stories to the global stage. And this series did a very, very awesome job in making sure that our story is heard. So no, I'm not famous, but I do appreciate the platform to be able to share our story.
Oh, good. I like it. There's a thread I want to stay on. You were talking about the wealth of movies on the continent that aren't getting out. And I just want to ask both of you about the role that international funding opportunities play or can play in raising capital for underrepresented founders. And this is open to anyone who wants to jump in.
I think it's important to explore it for certain, but I also think that it could introduce some complexity for an early stage company. So I guess the timing of when you explore that is important, depending on, you know, the type of investor, the type of international investor. But we've looked into it.
Correct. And for us, we've had multiple VCs outside of the United States interested, specifically in the African continent, and some in the European market as well. The problem is their governance of investment is different from the United States, right? And we've had investors commit to us, hey, we love this idea, we want to invest, only to come out with legalities not, meeting eye to eye. So that was a problem. So I believe in the early stages, right, it's very important to focus here in the US, right, because it keeps things moving. The only thing that early stage founders have in terms of competitive advantage in the marketplace is speed, right? We're able to execute things faster than, the big corporations. And if you start looking and exploring at investments outside of the United States, that's definitely going to slow things down. The opportunity is there, right? But it's just going to take much longer. I'm looking for angels. I'm looking for VCs that can get the money in the bank in a month, right? I have a payroll to meet. I have a team that needs to execute, right? We need to keep things moving and do things faster. So definitely international opportunities are there. Wait until the later stages, right? Series A, you can start engaging with investors, investors internationally, but just wait until you're much more stabilized. You have your team, and then once the opportunity comes, you're raising the later rounds, then you can go for those.
Good stuff. Thank you. When we talk about corporations and corporate partners, what role can corporate partners play in the investment and fundraising journey of underrepresented founders? And this is open to whoever wants to answer.
I mean, it's an ecosystem, running a startup. So, we talk a lot about fundraising, but that's, a piece of a big puzzle. So, there's press, there's customers, there's a whole pie. So I think from a corporate partnership standpoint, really exploring how not only to fund companies so that they have the capital to realize the stages in their roadmap, but also how do we promote what they're working on. That's one of the things I'd like to see more of. Is I would love to see more stories of underrepresented founders in their work, not because they're underrepresented, but because it's a great idea. And I find that a lot of these stories about us are all crafted around the fact that we're underrepresented, not because of the quality of the work. And those things actually really do matter. They matter a lot when you're recruiting staff. It matters when we're interviewing talent. They pay attention to the news. So that narrative around the journey of an underrepresented founder is really important because people that you may employ are looking at it. I've had potential employees ask me, "Is it difficult for me as a Black woman to raise funding?" That's part of their criteria as to whether they want to connect with us and work with us. So we really do need to paint more of a holistic picture of a day in the life of a founder. We're going to experience the same sort of problems that any other founder is going to experience, and a lot of us are doing some really good work. So amplifying the work, but also connecting founders to partners, other partners that may be aligned. They could be technology partners, sales channel partnerships, but in a really meaningful way that actually moves the business forward.
Correct. And like she said, it's an ecosystem, and corporate partnerships are very, very important for early stage companies, especially Black founders as well. And we are a part of that, right? With Comcast NBCUniversal being a partner of ours. Number one, it's so much harder for Black founders to get into the room, right, with corporations, right? CVC, corporate venture capital funds, or just in developing partners, and that was one of the greatest things that the accelerator provided for us. Was it gave us access to go into the doors, right? We just need an opportunity for those to be open for us to get in there and to be able to pitch some of these corporations. And that's what the accelerator provided for us, because through this corporate partnership, we were able to, number one, get some of our biggest distribution deals reaching millions of people, right? It took Afroland TV from, very few monthly active users, hundreds of hours watched, to over hundreds of thousands of users, to millions of hours to watch, right? Through those corporate partnerships. And the reason I say this, right? Corporations need to start divisions or open divisions for Black founders, right? It's so hard for us to get into those meetings, right? Open these divisions up, look for the promising startups, right? By founders of color, underrepresented founders as well. Give us opportunities to get into the door to pitch, right? I think that'll be so great, because in today's age, we simply cannot grow companies just by us doing it by ourselves. We need backup, we need help, we need an ecosystem, we need a village, right? It takes a village to raise a child. That's one of my favorite African proverbs. They need to open these doors for us to be able to pitch, right? We're not asking for handouts, but just give us an opportunity to get in there and pitch. And that's what I was able to do. The opportunity was opened and I sold it, right? And they believed in the vision, and this opened so many doors, not only for myself, but my employees. My employees get to see how it is to operate a startup. And again, this is part of the education system as well, because now they're learning how you partner with corporations and how things operate within the startup ecosystem. So corporate partnerships, incredibly valuable. Corporations, please open those doors, start a division, look for these underrepresented founders, and just open the door for them to at least come in and pitch why they think that you are a good partner for them. And then lastly, for the founders, do your homework on who the corporate partner you are looking for does. Right, you have to know how to navigate, and that will speak heavy of your leadership once the doors open. When I got into Comcast, I was able to tell them, hey, we want to be on Peacock. You guys own Fandango, Voodoo, right? More distribution channels. I was able to literally go in there and say, you guys are coming out with smart TVs, right? In the UK, you guys own Sky, right? Which the UK is a big demographic for Africans in the diaspora. Understand who you're going in the room with, and you'll be much better to sell it.
I like it. Thank you, Michael. I think we have time for maybe one or two questions. So one I'm going to throw out: have either of you had to walk away from funding?
Yes, a few times, mostly around alignment or stage. So there've been a few times where funding was offered, but we were not aligned very well with the investor. And I do a lot of research. I talk to founders a lot, because I think it matters. So I'm always talking to founders that have been where I'm trying to go. And particularly if they've been funded by an investor that's offering a check, I speak to them. And, if I'm getting critical stories around their experience post-funding, I may second guess whether or not it's a good check for us, depending on what stage we're in. But yes, a few times, just based on where we were as a company and what our needs were, and where that investor was as an investor and what their ultimate goals were.
Yes, same here. We've had misalignments in the vision and obviously the execution and the speed to scale. It's very, very important because, in these very early stages, you want all the money that can come in. And sometimes we don't have the luxury of nitpicking who our investors are, but be very strategic and have a good team of lawyers, right? And listen, you don't have to find, if you're in the very early stages, you can find lawyers without having to pay them upfront, right? They can do, I forgot the terminology on them, but you can pay them later.
Deferred comp.
Exactly. Right. So make sure you have a good partner in terms of legalities, lawyers that can interpret term sheets better than you can. Right. Understand that these investors, they do this every day. They know how to manipulate and sound complex, and you get lost and you sign something that sells the that takes majority of the company away. So make sure you have a good legal team. and make sure that you guys align, right? Don't just go out there. If somebody's willing to invest in it, somebody else will be willing to invest in it later, or maybe at the same time as well. So don't sell your soul.
Also, there are cascading implications of accepting a check that's not aligned well with your company. So, it may be good cash in the short term, but there's actually a real impact to your company. It could take you away from your roadmap. It could complicate how you spend your time as a founder. I could go on, but you should definitely be discerning.
And then the reporting, they can ask for it at any time. Things that can slow down you executing. There's so many things that you need a good legal team to help you interpret that.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Are there 1 to 3 very tactical lessons that you would want to leave people with today?
I have 3. One is to develop a way to increase your rate of learning, to learn quicker. So the way that I do that is, again, I speak with people that have been where I'm trying to go next. And also I do a lot of research using Crunchbase. It's honestly worth the subscription fee to get the information that you need about investors. Number 2 is be very specific and clear about your company's needs and where you are in your roadmap. So how much money will it take you to get to the next step? Be super specific about that, because again, it'll help you narrow the pool of investors that you need to speak with. And then systems. Fundraising is really a workflow. So you'll get a lot of no's, and the goal really is to focus on the ones that seem to be strong, compelling yeses. Maybes are the worst. People that leave you on the hook. You don't want to spend a lot of time there, but your goal is to get a yes or no, and you want to work it like a sales pipeline. And the way that you develop that system, again, is connecting to a founder that has already mastered the fundraising at the stage that you're in, and see if they can give you templates and some resources to help you along the way.
Correct. Completely agree with that as well. For me, number 1 is the ecosystem, right? Get connected within the ecosystem. Understand how startups work, be at these seminars, be at the different classes, pitch competitions, right? You want to get acclimated to what it means to be a founder, right? Traveling to places and so forth. Networking, because you never know who your next investor is, right? Actually, most of our investors were not investors that I pitched, right? They just came on later on, but we had developed a relationship over time. Number 2 is in the very early stages, do not focus on revenue, right? Revenue does not show that your company is going to be successful. Focus on users, right? Grow that user base, right? We didn't start, we didn't open up revenues until literally 2 months ago. Right. We've been in the market for quite some time now, but we didn't open it up until 2 months ago because we wanted to build and understand our audience. Because if you're able to understand that audience and grow it, then you can monetize it. It's not about revenues in the early stages. VCs, investors, they're not looking for revenues at the very early stages. So focus on users and then shift over to revenues at the later stage. The next thing is mental health. Keep yourself right. Right. This is tough. This is really, really tough. This is the hardest thing that I've done in my life. Make sure that you have escapes. Take some time away. Listen, what you see on TV, what you hear about working 80 hours a week, no sleep, no this. Listen, that's not for everybody. Right. Operate at your pace. Understand your pacing, because you're then much more effective that way. Take breaks. You need yourself to be mentally solid for you to execute at the highest capacity. So those are the 3 things I would say.
That was great. I really appreciate that from both of you. I think we are coming up on time. I really want to thank the 2 of you. This has been an amazing conversation. Kishar, I think some of the things you brought up, it's not a 1 o'clock in the afternoon conversation. It's a 5:30 with drinks.
That's not speed. I'm the happy hour person.
Exactly.
I appreciate all of the wealth of knowledge and information that the 2 of you had to to offer. I also want to thank the audience and our organizers. We wouldn't be here without Comcast NBCUniversal, Lift Labs. I'm going to thank Startup Grind as well. And that was a wonderful conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
That was Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our last session. And we have another fire session for you all with Ella Tamar Adnan, who is a Vice President of Startups and VC in Emerging Markets over at Silicon Valley Bank. Thank you for being one of our partners for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Month. We appreciate you all. And she'll be in conversation with Alison Byers, who is the founder and CEO of Scroobius. Alison, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And one of the things that caught my eye when I had a look at the website was it was about joining the Human First fundraising platform. And to me, I always say we're all part of one race, the human race. So it's incredibly exciting to hear all about what Scroobius is doing as a virtual platform and community to quickly and meaningfully connect underrepresented founders, investors, and partners all on one platform. And as I mentioned earlier on, whilst Tesla has recently been reported with a $1 trillion market capitalization, we're going to be talking about the next opportunity in the $1 trillion market space, and that is investing in diverse and female founders. Ella and Alison, over to you both.
Thank you so much, Finn. Thank you, and hello, everyone. I know many of you are sort of dialing from across the globe, so we appreciate taking the time and spending the next hour with us. My name is Ella Adnan. As Finn mentioned, I'm a vice president with Silicon Valley Bank. For those of you who don't know SVB, we pride ourselves for being the bank for the innovation economy. We've been working with founders and investors supporting technology companies for nearly 40 years. And in the spirit of celebrating Diversity and Inclusion Month of October, we are super excited to partner with our friends at Startup Grind. In this session today, as mentioned prior, we will discuss the importance of investing in companies founded by underrepresented founders and the $1 trillion untapped opportunity. You know, the reason that we decided on this topic is we've seen the tremendous of really record-breaking venture investments and ample liquidity in the market. Women and diverse founders share of VC, funding, however, remains astonishingly small. The structural challenges remain and are well known for to all of us. And today, that's exactly what we'd like to talk about, the untapped financial opportunity that VCs are losing when they don't invest in these underrepresented founders. I'm honored to share this virtual stage with Alison Byers. She was introduced briefly, but I am going to introduce her as well. Founder and CEO of Scroobius, that is really building the next generation of platform community to efficiently and meaningfully connect diverse founders, investors, and partners in the tech space. Alison is committed to helping overlooked founders get in the front of the right investors with the right message, which is key. She's an MBA with over 15 years of experience building and leading data-driven startups. She has done everything from management consulting to advising Google and marketing on strategy and co-running medical device company where she raised nearly $10 million. She's been featured in Business Insider and is a frequent advisor, mentor, and speaker. So excited to have you here, Alison. Thank you very much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. What a great event. And if you guys were on the last panel, amazing conversation. I loved it. And thank you for having me and for the great partnership with SVB. You guys are doing so much to uplift diverse founders, and it's just great.
Thank you. And, I agree with you. I also listened to the prior session, and I mentioned earlier, I took notes because there's so much information and a lot has been said, and hopefully a lot will be done in the future as well. But Alison, why don't we just start by we all gave your brief of your introduction, but I would love to share a little bit about yourself and the company and what you guys are building right now at Scroobius.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to start a little bit before Scroobius, I'll give you my own origin story, which we had talked about being so important, and that, or the panel had talked about before. But I founded Scroobius in January of 2020, which was a month before COVID hit. A really interesting time to start a company, and I'm sure we'll revisit that. But beforehand, I had launched and was co-running a startup medical device, as you had talked about. It was spun out of MIT and a hospital system here in the Boston area. And I was the one responsible for fundraising primarily at the company. And so we did raise almost 10 million, which is great. We went from our friends and family through a Series A prime with grants and bridges and everything else in there. But it took 5 years. And for me, I was really caught off guard by the challenges I faced fundraising as a woman. I'm used to being the only woman in the room. That was not an issue for me. But what I experienced from a gendered perspective just floored me. I couldn't get over it. And I also recognize that I come from a place of advantage when it comes to fundraising, right? There is a lot of positive signals associated, and I have a really strong network. And if I was hitting all of these challenges and encountering all of this bias, what about everybody else who doesn't have those advantages? It really just stuck with me. And if you're looking at it from the perspective of somebody who is underestimated, of course, we're getting a tiny fractional share of venture dollars. Everything in the system is working against us. So that company was acquired, and I spent a lot of time researching and thinking, how can I make an impact in this space? What can I do to help increase diversity and get capital into the hands of those founders who have great innovations and have great ideas and are being systemically blocked? And so there are two ways where I saw that I could help. One is in founder education, which again came up a lot in that last panel. For founders who don't come from a business background, who have not risen up with mentors and peers in the entrepreneurship space, it is not intuitive how you pitch. And even if you have been in that world, but you come from more academia or a scientific background, it is not intuitive how you pitch. It's a very different type of conversation, a very different type of process, both in terms of the content that you put into your presentation, but also how you present it and how you go about building up that network. So that's our kind of core program at Scroobius, is a scalable platform that is approachable, affordable education for everyone to be able to learn how you pitch effectively with investor-ready material so that you're taken seriously when you do go pitch. And then we're working on some exciting things on the investor side as well, but I think I'll kind of leave it there for the intro.
Yeah, that's great. I think honestly, getting your pitch deck ready and writing, or I guess conveying the right message, is a tricky thing for every founder. But obviously, it's it gets a little more difficult when we talk about underrepresented founders. So that really kind of led me to the next question, because I'm hearing your story and the journey, and oftentimes we talk about the intentionality with founders when there's something sparks them and something inspires them to start a venture. And I think obviously in being a founder is such a taxing and sort of long journey. And when time gets hard, and they will, you sort of have to come back and ask, why have I started this to begin with? And I think, with you, it's kind of clear, you going through your journey and understanding the structural barrier, not only for you as a woman, but also understanding that there's maybe a community that it can be even less fortunate or less privileged, we can call it that way. So, sort of you answered the inspiration part of it, but we're still seeing the gap, right? We are seeing the record amount that are being raised right now, particularly in the last year and a half. And obviously, you've started your journey during COVID, so challenges are no strange to you. But I do want to talk about the untapped opportunity. How do you see this, and why is it smart to invest in diverse and women founders, not just because it's the right thing or sort of the narrative of underrepresented in the market? Why is it financially smart thing to do?
Yeah, it's so important to talk about this in formats like this, in public formats, because it isn't just the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, but it is a financially smart investment decision, right? Time and time again, research shows that diverse teams perform better. So there are tons of stats here, but just a few. Female founders were found to perform 63% better than all male founding teams. Women raise half as much as men, but we return 2.5 times more per dollar invested. So we do more with less, no surprise. And diverse teams earn a 3.3 times median realized multiple when they go to IPO or acquisition, compared to 2.5 times for all white founding teams. And there are so many, right? Those are just a few that I pulled out, but there's so many statistics like that. And so what it says is that for the investors who take the time to find and meaningfully evaluate these opportunities from founding teams that are diverse and in many different elements of diversity, right? They will realize higher financial gain. It is to their benefit that we truly are, when I say we, I mean anyone who identifies as underrepresented in this space, and primarily women and people of color. We are an undervalued asset class, which is financially speaking an undervalued asset class, and investors can take advantage of that. So it's a smart decision. And just on the other points that you had talked about, we are seeing unprecedented amounts of capital and venture capital, but I don't believe fixing VC is the answer. And these unprecedented amounts are primarily seed stage and beyond. They're not truly early stage. They're not pre-seed or the replacement for the friends and family round for those who don't have this mythical friends and family that can just write them checks.
I like the mythical part of it.
Yeah, exactly. But they're looking for startups to be at a place where they've already de-risked a lot of the signals that that they're looking for. And to get to that place of being de-risked, you have to have already obtained some capital to be able to progress your company to that stage, right? Seed stage is different than what comes before it. And most VCs are not looking there. So I actually think a much bigger opportunity for creating or obtaining the capital you need to get your company started at the really early stage comes from angel investors and emerging fund managers, who are, or sometimes they're called micro funds. But they have a very different investing hypothesis. They have a huge amount of spending power and investing power. I think a lot of founders don't realize there are more than 4 million actively investing accredited investors in the US alone. That's not even global, right? And 3,000 of them will make their first investment this year. And they want to get in there with you. They have experience or operational expertise that allows them to identify these non-pattern matching opportunities that VCs are passing over. So it really, there is this huge white space to be able to connect what is basically a fragmented marketplace of overlooked founders with great ideas that we should have in the economy. That's the $1 trillion opportunity, right? They should be advancing our society and our economy. And these investors who want to be part of that, but aren't the traditional or homogenous investors.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So you're really saying sort of focus on the super early stages, and we all sort of we laughed earlier about the friends and family that people are just saying so casually, and that's exactly sort of what can propel your expansion to become a little more a growth company, and then being more investable, if that makes sense, and getting more customers. I do agree regarding the emerging managers as well, and I sort of see a more awareness to it, and I think I'm seeing more and more even Black founders becoming sort of emerging managers, and I'm seeing that diversity in that space increasing. So hopefully that's something that is being taking notes on that front. So getting back to what Scribius does, how do you with Scribius, how do you guys are uniquely aim to help access to make access to capital more equitable? How are you guys doing this with this company?
Yeah, so that's kind of going back to these two different angles. One is in the founder education, right? When you get to see like the number, the growth we're seeing in founders who are overlooked or, new majority or underestimated, pick your term here, the growth is incredible, but they are still systemically blocked from that first stage of capital, right? So that's part of why I am focused on the really, truly early stage, right? Ideation through pre-seed or sometimes seed round. There's a blurred line there. What's a pre-seed and seed stage these days?
These days, for sure.
Yeah, because they need that. They need the smaller checks with the people that are going to also provide their time and resources, expertise, and network, right? Those are angel investors in a true sense, or emerging fund managers can be in that capacity as well. And one of the first ways you get that meeting, it's still the pitch. It's going to be the pitch. It's not going away anytime soon. And the pitch has become what the business plan used to be, right? Nobody writes these long, like 50-page business plans anymore, but they were good because they forced you to think through all the mechanics of your business. And that is what somebody is going to be able to take seriously when you present it. So I think, part of what we're seeing is today, this abundance of platforms that allow you to post your material and say that they have this investor of networks who will then look at your material. But if you're not providing the education first on how you present that material and what should be in it, it's really a disservice. It can be very detrimental to you if you're putting that out there in the public sphere and you don't realize that it's not investor ready, right? So there are elements of your storytelling of how you define and quantify your problem and how you display what your solution is. But there's also things like your financial projections, like doing a bottom-up market size so that you understand what that means, identifying your assumptions that will trigger the projections so you can play around with your model. All of that is stuff that is completely teachable. You just have to teach people. So that's a core way that we're trying to make this a more level playing field or more equitable is, hey, here, like it is approachable for you, it is affordable for you. We pair online asynchronous access to learning and tools with personalized feedback from somebody who understands what you're going through and has a lot of knowledge in this space. So you get both parts of that. You get the feedback you wish investors would give to you, but they often don't, to really get founders in that confident place, both in the content that they're putting out there and also in how they are presenting it and how they are presenting themselves. All in that vein of, you have a robust pitch and you feel confident in how you are presenting it. And then on the other side of it, the investor side, we're currently building out our investor portal. And what we're doing there that's different is building a recommendation engine so that we are curating what investors see. And again, we're targeting really angel investors for the most part, so individuals, based on your own engagement with the platform, based on how you are behaving, what you are looking at that is indicative of what you might like to invest in. And we're also going to be picking up on signals of like-minded engagement and behavior so that we can establish connections among funders who can then create pooled capital, right? Whether it's SPVs or new groups or syndicates or what have you, that they otherwise wouldn't know each other either because they are their own fragmented market, to get more capital into the hands of these founders who need it at the early stage.
Well, that's really great. And the fact that it's scalable also, because you can't, you want to reach to a broader audience, and but I really sort of like the fact that you're helping founders, but also helping investors on the other side as well to tap in those opportunities. You yourself have gone through a pitching experience, and I know that's something you're sort of good at, and you've raised nearly 10 million with the previous company, and now I know you're also reviewing the early stage investors, and as part of Scorpius, if you could say 3 or 5 key things that what are investors looking for, what do they want to see in pitch deck?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time building up kind of our own framework of the 10 core building blocks. It's up on our website. I put a ton of content up there for anybody who's interested in what those are. There is no one size fits all, right? There is no like authority on what goes in them, and everyone is flavored by their own experience and their own interests, which is part of what makes this such a frustrating experience. But I think maybe, like you said, I'll pull out just a few that I know are important to investors that I often see missing in pitch decks. One of them is the origin story, right? Any investor knows that it is going to be harder than you think it's going to be to launch and run your company. So they need to know why you did it. It is a big deal to start a company and go for funding. That's a certain path that you're doing for the life cycle of your company, right? So they need to know that when it does get harder than you think it's going to be, that you're going to stick with it, that you're in it for more than just potential financial return. Why did you start it? It is just so important to have that personal note, because at the early stage, they are investing in you. You are the steward of their capital. There is no, company behind you that they're giving this money to, and it's you. You're the steward. So they have to understand your own motivation and characteristics when it came to starting your company. So that's one. Another is the why now, both in a macro sense and a micro. So what's going on in the world, in the economy? Why is now the time for what you are building to exist? It's really important. And if you bring up COVID and the pandemic, talk about how you are accelerated by it, not defined by it, right? That's a really important distinction as well. And then the third area that I often see missing information, or it's just kind of up there, but not getting to what investors want to know, is your team slide. So if you're a solo founder, if you're a small team, totally fine. But your team slide should show who have you gathered around you that is filling in for your own skill gaps, right? So where are your gaps and how have you filled them in lieu of being able to hire full-time? That's what they want to know, that you have been able to bring people in, whether they're advisors or contractors or investors, who is functioning with you in your team to execute your vision while you're being, conscious of your limited capital. That's the point of the team slide. So those are kind of three big areas that I don't see in decks a lot of the time.
Absolutely. And, looking at what's going on in the market right now, and I think in previous times, it was so difficult for honestly almost any founder, regardless of which community they come from, to tap into VC funding. It was always sort of a closed club for many. But I think I'm looking at the market right now, and I keep hearing this is the founder market. This is the founder market. Lots of money, lots of capital in the market, and it feels like the power dynamic is shifting. So I would love to hear your thoughts, drawing from your own experience. What do founders need to keep in mind when interacting with investors, when negotiating with investors? I feel like now, the dynamic is changing and it's actually favoring founders. But overall, how do you see this relationship when at the beginning and then obviously along the way?
Yeah, so I talk about power dynamics a lot, and I think in that bigger view, things are shifting in a way that they have not before, but it's going to be a slow change. And it doesn't mean that every meeting you have now, you are, the founders are just getting money all over, right? The statistics are showing that that's not true. If you are overlooked or underestimated. But when you are pitching an investor, it is so easy for founders who identify as underrepresented to immediately take on this persona of I am less than you, Mr. or Mrs. Investor, right? And you kind of shrink and you get into that less than mindset because we're used to it. And it's intimidating to ask somebody for money. And we know the statistics and the chances of our success of getting that capital. But it disadvantages us even more when we go into it with that mindset, because investors are also looking for signals of confidence. And signals of confidence include direct eye contact, right? Even if you're remote, train yourself to do what I'm doing. I'm staring right into my webcam. I can't see your expression all that well, but you're right, the audience, you're feeling my eye contact. Do that when you're pitching. Don't look down. It's a different signal. Speak in short, clear sentences. Own yourself, own your posture, right? You are offering this investor an opportunity to profit off of your company, right? Back to that financial proposition. You are not a charity. You are saying, I am building something that is going to provide outsized value at the end of the day. I'm going to take your money and I'm going to make it more. So present yourself that way, because it is true. It is accurate. That is how investors make money off of their investments. It's you are creating it and you're offering them that chance. And you're saying, have in your mind, if you don't give me capital, I'm going to find somebody else who will, and they're going to get the profit, right? Because I'm going to go do this. And that's the power dynamic that should happen. There are a lot of things in the fundraising process that take away from that power dynamic or push it down. I personally really don't like most pitch competitions. I think they are terrible for founder mental health. If there's something that's making you feel less than, don't participate in it. Do something else. There's so much stuff out there happening right now. So I think, just for underestimated founders, it's so important to make sure that you have that confidence, both internally and externally, and investors will respond to it.
Yeah, I think, and I think in the prior session as well, it's oftentimes when we, especially specifically when we talk about underrepresented founders, when we talk about fundraising, it's always sort of, we discuss the challenges and it's so beautifully right now, this is about returns. And, these companies are not charity. And I think, the focus should be on, if you want your returns, you should invest in me, and not in representation matters, yes. And there are such structural barriers, yes. But I think that focusing on the financial gains for these investors will sort of, help a lot in that process. I'm curious to know your thoughts about sort of, I guess looking ahead, how do you see this shifting? How do you see making access to capital a little more accessible? And I know you've been working on your platform, and I know you've been working on both sides of the coin. And I know that there's plenty of initiatives happening, but looking ahead, I guess on the macro level, maybe if there's any details, how do you see this plays out for founders that are diverse background and for women specifically?
Yeah, so again, right, any big shift is going to take time. So I don't see a huge change happening when we have a short-term view, but long-term, I think there is going to be a dramatic shift in how early stage capital is obtained. And I've hit on this a little bit already, but we're going to see more individual investors. We're going to see more SPVs, syndicates, angel groups, whatever their function is for rolling up money, come together from investors who are disparate geographically, who have different backgrounds, and they are diverse, right? If you think about our emerging investors, emerging angels, they are younger generations. They are more diverse demographically generations, and they are being much more intentional with where they are putting their money, and they have different return expectations and time horizons. And it's going to lead to a greater chance of success for companies started by underrepresented founders, which is growing, in its own right. And it's going to provide this launch pad or springboard in a way that we haven't seen before. And it's going to position more diverse founders to be ready for the larger rounds. And by the time they get there, right, if we're thinking generationally over time, how's this shift occurring? Those founders who see success, or those emerging fund managers who see success, are more likely to write checks to other diverse founders. And that's going to be its own perpetuating cycle. This is part of why I don't think trying to fix the big traditional VC shops is the answer. Yes, they have a ton of capital right now, but cumulatively, emerging fund managers and angels have more. And I think that's really going to change the landscape in a way that has not been possible historically.
Very interesting. I guess for, sort of, if you, it's more a personal question, but had you, knowing what you know now, is there anything you would have done differently in your own journey as a founder?
So it's a really interesting question in terms of COVID and the impact that it had, and my decisions I've made with Scroobius. And I think in terms of what I would have done differently, I might answer it in terms of a lesson that I learned in running that med device company, where it was the traditional fundraise. It was pre-COVID, right? I was flying all over the place, and I burned out really hard a few times. And in starting Scroobius, I had my whole plan, all my planning was done to incorporate 1 month before COVID. And I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids in elementary school who all of a sudden were home all the time, and I had to teach them, right? And collectively as a society, it was a traumatic event that we were all coping with. What was life going to be now? And I made the decision based on those past burnouts to say, you know what? I'm going to build this in a way that works. And it might be slower growth. Okay, that's okay. You don't have to get into the trajectory that we see kind of on social media and in popular press of go, 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 hit these growth milestones. You're never going to get funding if you don't do this. You got to like have big revenues by year 3 and all this stuff. No, you don't. There's no rule that says that you have to do that. So that's advice I would give to people. It's advice I'm taking myself. Sometimes it is really hard to look back over time and say, oh, I didn't do what I wanted to do. I'm not moving fast enough, right? But you also have a life. You were a person before your startup. You are a person independent of your startup, and you will be a person after your startup. And that's what I wish I had done before. And I'm trying really hard to do now is take that life perspective and say, it is okay to grow this company and fund it in the way that works for me, which is slower, but it makes me no less capable of executing. It doesn't make the opportunity smaller. It doesn't make the potential financial return to my investors smaller. It's just a different way of operating that works. And I think a lot of parents are going to have to adopt that model if they want to keep their sanity.
Love that. I do want to ask a question that came from the audience. If your own network lacks diversity and you rely on your network for deal flow, how can you expect to see startups led by diverse founders? Use Allison's platform. No, but serious and on a serious note, I mean, obviously community and, especially when fundraising, a lot of it's, we call it the herd mentality. People invest in what their friends invest or other VCs, and if you don't have in the community diverse people, like how can you capitalize on getting startups led by diverse founders?
I mean, go to the other communities. It's not like we don't exist, right? So you hear this all the time. There's a pipeline problem. I don't have them in my network. What am I supposed to do? Yeah, check out Scroobius, right? We launched our MVP in February of this year. We worked with over 200 founders now. Tons of them have closed their rounds. They've raised millions. They've gotten into every accelerator that you can think of off the top of your head. These are investable businesses. The founders needed a little help telling their story and getting their business plan in a place that was investor ready. And they're going to they're amazing. They're amazing founders. And there are communities like mine. There's tons of other ones. So if you really are having that deal flow issue and you want to find these founders intentionally, find out where they are and go interact with them, right? Go to Twitter. Twitter is an amazing resource for the startup economy, both founders and investors. Go contact a founder that you respect who is of an underestimated background and ask them to introduce you to their network. Say, I do investing, right? I'm an angel investor. I'd love to find this kind of founder. That's who I'm intentionally looking for. Do you know anyone? Cold email the founders and they will love it. And of course, if you cold email me and say, I'm looking for this kind of person, like, well, one, you should be part of my network anyway. But 2, I will tell you the names of people. I don't profit off of, my business model doesn't run on taking a percentage of a closed round or anything to do with the financing round. That's not how I want to play my game. I want those founders to get capital, as do almost every other founder in the space. So just reach out to where we are.
So essentially, there's no pipeline problem. There's no real deal flow issue. It's really just accessing the right communities. And going back to what you said earlier about angel investors and emerging managers, I think we're seeing more and more of that type of investors from the underrepresented communities. We're seeing more women investors, more investors that are Black or Latinx, and I think you can sort of tap into those emerging managers or those investors and sort of ask about their deal flow. It's just sort of challenge your own, how do you actually go about deal flow? But I think I completely agree that it's out there. It's just needs to be, you just need to want enough to do it.
Yeah, look in different pipes.
Yeah. So Allison, as we wrap up, I think we have literally 1 minute. We sort of spoke about the opportunity, your journey, and sort of looking ahead. If you could give 3 advice for sort of the next generation of founders and entrepreneurs, what would it be?
So if I had to give one piece of advice to budding entrepreneurs, I give this advice applies in many situations, but start with your end goal in mind. So for you, if you're deciding whether to start something, what do you personally want to achieve and want out of this experience? It can't just be, I want to start a company and make lots of money, because this is a hard road, right? And the chance of success is pretty low, right? Let's just be honest, particularly if we're of the underestimated variety. But there are lots of ways to be entrepreneurial. It doesn't necessarily mean this romanticized vision that you see like on Shark Tank or in the popular press of, I'm going to start a company, I'm going to grind myself, to the bone, I'm going to raise venture funding, and then I'm going to, go to the moon. That is not real life most of the time, but nor is it necessarily the right thing to do to achieve the goals that you have in mind for your own life and the purpose of what it is that you're building. So really evaluate that and think, is there a different way that I can achieve these goals or gain the experience I want before I go out and do that big idea? Or is your big idea something that you can get so passionate about that you want to see it out in the world? So really do a deep dive internally, and don't be an entrepreneur just for the sake of being an entrepreneur. Make sure that it's the right thing for you.
100% agree. And, if I may add, before we just close this off, I think going back to what we had initially spoke about, and I'm looking at you as a founder, I think when you start that journey, and it's a long-term one, obviously we often don't talk about the failures, and we all hear the big funding announcements and IPOs, but it's a very challenging journey. And I think starting with your why are you doing this, and why are you the right person to solve this particular problem, will make much more sense. When time get hard, you can always go back to that question and sort of get the drive back again, because it's going to be, again, a long and taxing, and oftentimes people don't see the idea as clear as you see it. So I think it's the intentionality of solving the problem that you're trying to solve, will make that a bit easier. With that, Allison, I could not thank you enough. Thank you so much for being so incredible, and thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for jumping on today and sharing this virtual with me, stage with me. We appreciate taking that time, and hopefully, and I can't wait to see what you guys are doing at Scorpius, and I know you guys are working on cool stuff. So keep us posted. And I would love to thank our partner Startup Grind for this venue. And again, I mentioned earlier, I think this is an exciting time to be a founder. There's a lot of opportunities, and specifically being an underrepresented founder or women. It's all about getting that access to the right network, getting the right idea and going for it. And I think using the community and using platforms like Allison's, it will make a lot of difference in your journey. And obviously, as this being an SVBers, we welcome you to, reach out to us with any questions that you have. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Ella and Allison. That was incredible and super insightful. I think there were definitely a lot of takeaways that, me as someone who's part of the Startup Grind community, we could definitely all utilize, and hopefully you, as our global startup community the world over, you can utilize as well. And chief among them, as they say, it is, especially if you're in the startup world and you are building a for-profit startup, you maybe have something incredible that these investors should be a part of. So share that story, share that journey. And this marks the end of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit. Thank you to our incredible partners, Silicon Valley Bank, Comcast NBCUniversal, for being a part of both our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Month and our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit. The incredible team who are behind the scenes, Bruce, Erica, Jacqueline, Caro, Daniel, who have all done some incredible work in bringing you this incredible Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Summit. Thank you, team. None of this would be possible without each one of you. And then, of course, you are incredible attendees. Thank you for joining and being a part of this incredible Startup Grind community. We hope that you can attend one of our global chapter events the world over. Just head on over to startupgrind.com/events. and find a local event near you. Our chapter directors are there to engage with you as much as possible. And next up, we have some incredible upcoming events. The fun is not over. As I always say, it's a lot of people. We have the Student Summit coming up the 10th of November. Head on over to the startupgrind.com/events page, as I mentioned, and you'll be able to find the Student Summit if you're interested in that particular genre. And then 2022 marks the return of our global conference, and I'm stoked. I could not be more excited to be seeing our chapter director community coming back together, and of course our incredible Startup Grind community coming together to just kind of celebrate, meet each other, support each other at our in-person event in Redwood City. The dates of those will be from February 28th to March the 2nd of March 2022. There'll be a slide showing after this. We hope you can make it. Thank you all for joining us, and look after yourselves. Take care.